Let's go ahead and move on to 6.3, our 9:04 a.m. item, presentation considering annual delinquent sewer and water tax roll schedule and establish staff direction from Board of Supervisors. Welcome.
Good morning. Mr. Chair, members of the board. Scott Harder, Special Districts Administrator. I've got Jesse Salmeron, our Deputy Administrator in charge of finance here with me. So this morning's presentation is just kind of an update on where we are and some changes that we are proposing to make to our policy for delinquency collection and when we annually roll delinquent accounts to the tax roll. We received feedback from the board and from customers last year on the time frame and just some of the mechanisms around that procedure. And so we've made some proposed changes. We'd like to run that by you, get your feedback before we go into implementing it this year, April, May-ish. Jesse?
Good morning, Board. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Considering the annual delinquent sewer and water tax roll schedule. So in the previous years, all accounts that were 60 days past due would be eligible for tax roll, eligible for a tax roll by the tax roll hearing, which typically occurred in the middle of July. We would send notices out to the customers both in May and in June. Sorry. In May and in June, depending if they were a odd billing customer or a even billing customer. The proposed changes we're making this year is creating a cutoff date for the delinquency. So our proposal is to create a cutoff point for the final bill of the previous calendar year. That would make December the most current bill to be eligible for the tax roll that occurs in July. What this does is it creates a 6-month gap in between the delinquent bill and the tax roll hearing. This also establishes a maximum dollar amount that can be tax rolled, and that dollar amount will be seen on the delinquent notice that we'll be mailing. We believe the tax roll letter will be easier to understand by having a clear dollar amount to be paid down and by providing the customer an extended period of time to bring down the balance. So some guidance we are looking from the board is when to send out the delinquent notices. In the past, like I mentioned, we've mailed them out in May and in June. However, we're considering sending them either in April. This gives earlier notice to the customer to pay down the balance, or sending them out in May, which is a little closer to the tax roll hearing, so it's a little fresher in the minds of the customers. We're also looking to hear your thoughts and concerns on our new policy, and yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Anything more, Director Harder?
No, I think that kind of summarizes it.
And make sure to speak in the microphone.
The primary feedback that you got from the board and customers last year is that the timing seemed rather short. And if someone was just delinquent, since we bill on a bi-monthly, so it's a 60-day billing cycle, if you were just that far delinquent, you were eligible for tax roll, and that seemed rather punitive. So what we've proposed to do is just focus on the previous calendar year. So, for example, it would be 2023 calendar year, the last billing cycle in that calendar year. If someone is still delinquent come April, May, when those notices go out for balances in 2023, then they're eligible. But if they're not, if they're eligible, well, if they're delinquent on, the first billing cycle in 2024, they're not going to be proposed to be rolled onto tax roll. So it gives them some time to catch their breath, catch up, and not be immediately rolled to tax roll. So a little fairer for the customers, a little easier on our hand because it's not a rolling delinquency that we're trying to track. We're just looking at that block, that calendar year. So it'll stretch it a little bit this cycle, but then it's going to be the same cycle and it won't impact us fiscally in the future.
Okay. Any comments or questions regarding the change on policy? Supervisor Simon?
Yeah. Obviously, I like the opportunity to get it out earlier so they get that notice, so that's a positive there. And the suggestion also keeping it fresher in the minds of folks as the tax roll hearing is going to come up, I think is also another, I think that's a positive change. So, in support of it.
Okay. Any other comments? Supervisor Green?
So by eligible, you mean a older debt that you would propose to place on a tax roll?
Correct.
So rather than catching up with the first quarter of this year, for example, and what you're going to bring back for the proposed tax roll, you're just going to focus on 23?
Yes.
Okay. may I never be eligible. All right, thank you.
And if I'm correct, 23 will be slightly shortened just for the fact that we did do the defaulted properties, I guess, for the lack of a better term. We did that when? In June, July, sometime like that?
Yeah, so there was
I
a
think it captured a certain portion of
captured-
23. So
Exactly.
this will be a bit of a shorter one, and then the following year, that covers all of 2024, will be the entirety of 2024.
Correct.
For those that are defaulted. Quick question. So I like it. It fits exactly in what we were kind of looking for. That way you're not sending out an extra direct charge on top or an assessment that's $50, $60. That's a very small thing that could potentially be taken care of, rather than obviously somebody who hasn't paid for 2 or 3 times in a row. What is your policy for, let's say somebody doesn't pay their first bill and they start accruing all of it? Do you wait till we go through the tax assessment process, or is there communication with the users prior to that saying, hey, you're not paying your bill, let's have a conversation, just to see if we're asking somebody to pay it, making up numbers, $2,000 all at once, or if you're having the conversation earlier to try and change
Yeah,
that beforehand?
Certainly. As soon as they're delinquent, they're receiving late notices, they're receiving proactive communication from our office. They're receiving opportunities to set up a payment plan. We're now enrolled in the LEWAP program, Low-Income Water Assistance Payment Program, so that they are eligible through that program for up to $2,000, I believe, one-time payment of utility bills. So we have options, and we begin working with them early.
Okay. Is there a point where things get shut off if the delinquency is too long?
On the water side, yes. On the sewer side, not typically. The sewer ordinance does have some language in there on 18 months past due. I've got some questions in with county council. We do have an individual who is kind of 20 months, I think we're at that point. Interesting character, pays with postage stamps and all kinds of interesting notes on his bills and sends it in. So we're looking at how to handle that one. So there's provision within the sewer use ordinance. It's just a little more involved. You know, you have to physically go down and cut and cap the sewer lateral, and then you're going to want to get code enforcement and environmental health involved, because without those utilities, they should not be occupying the residence. So.
Okay. And then my last question is, I know you just changed the way that you do your billing with the larger piece of paper in an envelope rather than the little postcard that it used to be. Is it possible to the heads up about the tax assessment, mix that in so that you don't have to double the amount of mailing, or does it have to be separate?
We could include it. We would probably have to run those batches separately and possibly hand stuff those.
I'm just curious. I don't know what would be more cost effective or more efficient. Just wanted to ask the
It
question.
might be more cost effective to run a separate mailing, because I think in order to do it included with the bill, we run that batch, and then we're going to have to hand stuff those particular ones in those accounts.
Okay. Appreciate you coming up, then showing us this new policy and getting our opinions on it. And it looks like Vice Chair Crandall has something to say.
I just wanted to ask, and is there any thought to ever like doing something with a company or agency that does like a text type of reminder along with the mailer? Because I know that a lot of our community members need the mailer. That's just unequivocal. But there's some folks that you may capture in that aspect. But I know, again, it's got to be feasible. I'm not trying to,
Yeah. We've thought about it, and I know other departments, Clear Lake Oaks County Waterworks Department, uses a system that has the ability for text messaging out. A lot of that depends, too, on whether or not the customer wants to provide that mobile phone number.
Right.
And if they want to receive those text numbers. So.
All right, thanks.
And then you did kind of ask us a question that I don't feel we gave you consensus on about earlier submitting. I know that there are state laws, but I don't think the law prohibits from earlier sending out. It's just within a certain number of days before we have our public hearing, it needs to be sent out. I know that Supervisor Simon was in favor of it. I'm in favor of the
Okay.
earlier to get people to at least be alerted, so maybe they can pay it off as quickly as possible rather than a shorter time frame. Going to look at other board members to see. We have multiple heads shaking yes, so
Okay.
please, earlier the better. And that was the only thing that I think we're looking to change here. And so I'm going to open it up for the public unless there's another comment from the board. Supervisor Green?
Just real quick, I'm not super familiar signing off on policies, so this is just conceptual. Would you be bringing back the policy for final look at, or are we just giving you direction and letting you run with it?
My impression was that you were given direction us and letting us go with it. It's an internal policy. It's not something that's publicized or codified by the board, but it's more our internal working with the auditor, tax collector, and when we send those delinquencies out.
Okay. The only reason I mention that is, I don't know if we're up here rubber stamping policies, but I don't see the draft changes like attached in a summary document. So you'll be communicating this with your customers anyway, but it'd be nice to have it there, because I appreciate the notes, but I don't have a written document, and neither does the public to really digest other than this oral summary of these changes that you presented. So if it's not going to come back to the board for any type of formal approval, how will you be communicating this change to your customers?
We could formalize it and put it up on our website and send it to the board as well.
Okay.
We do provide a schedule to the Auditor Controller's Office every year.
Okay.
And if you can say that on the microphone. Sorry.
We do provide a schedule to the Auditor Controller's Office every year.
Okay. I appreciate the question because, yes, we want to make sure that the users, those that are involved in the payment, involved in the defaults, are up to date on what's going on and what the process will be. So that was a good question. Thank you for that. If there's nothing further, let's open it up for the public. I see no hands raised in the Zoom room and no hands up in the chamber. And at this moment in time, you have consensus to move forward with this. I do not believe that you need a motion to approve, since there's nothing in writing to approve necessarily, but appreciate the conversation.